Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Brandon Conley, Chief Revenue Officer of App Omni. Brandon, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sugata.
You have an amazing background, Brandon, in channel and in large enterprises. So I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion. You have gone through a massive evolution over the years. But before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? A lot of people know you, but some may not. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your background and your journey.
Brandon Conley. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at App Omni. As of February, I will be here 5 years. So joined the company very early in its journey, about 2 quarters after we started shipping a product. Prior to that, I was running worldwide sales for Prisma Cloud at Palo Alto Networks in the CSPM space, and Redlock prior to that. And then spent a year and a half, 2.5 years at Netscope in the SaaS security space. So it's been cloud security for the last 7-8 years or so.
Must be an exciting space, right? Because it's rapidly growing. Everything is in cloud right now. A lot of threats with AI. So you must be seeing a lot of actions in that space.
It's been a really, really fun journey with really fast growth. A lot of it thanks to the channel, which I guess is what we're here to talk about today. But we've seen everything move to the cloud, whether it's enterprise applications as SaaS, with diminishing on-prem, or it's building applications and running them in public cloud and AWS and Azure and GCP. The trend has accelerated since COVID, during and since COVID. And most organizations, CISO security teams have pretty limited visibility, particularly into what's happening in their SaaS applications. So at App Omni, it's been really fun educating the market about the security risks associated with SaaS and solutions for mitigating those risks.
So you and I go back a while. So if we think about 10 or 15 years ago, how sort of the channel was, now it's evolved into this word called partner ecosystem, because it's more than just resellers and installers and MSSPs. So talk to me a little bit how you have seen the evolution over the last decade or more, what so-called the channel looked like, and how does it look like today, and what does the word ecosystem mean to you? How have you seen the evolution, predominantly from a large enterprise perspective?
That's a good place to start, right? When we were together 10, 15 years ago, we were working in a company that had an amazing 2-tier distribution machine, right? Month after month after month, quarter after quarter, the revenue grew, more units shipped. We needed distribution for warehousing of physical equipment with firewalls. My world today is completely different, right? Everything that we deliver is SaaS based. There's nothing to ship. There's nothing to warehouse and store around the world. And so most of my experience over the last 7, 8+ years has been through various different types of channel partners, resellers, managed service providers, global systems integrators, but mostly on the front end, identifying opportunities, going in together, and then post sales on implementation and operationalization. So the channel for me represents more than just increasing our presence in the market, our footprint. It also is critical to us ensuring that our customers get value out of the product, that they successfully deploy and operationalize the solution so that they come back and expand with us.
So from a large enterprise perspective, traditionally, most large enterprises, they brought in consulting houses like Pricewater or Accenture and etc. So how was it about a decade ago? Because we didn't see a lot of channel partners participate except those large consulting houses that will design and sort of the infrastructure, and then the vendor will directly go in, deploy, manage by themselves. So have you seen that change a bit on the large enterprise side, how they procure, who supports them, and what is happening on the managed services side? Is managed services has been traditionally in SMB and mid-market. Do you see that also moving up in enterprise? Like, how is that playing out?
I do see a different role for the channel with large enterprise than what I saw in the past. They still do consume in every conceivable way, which is simply purchasing the product through a reseller and then deploying it themselves. In many cases, they want assistance with that deployment. So it's not a fully managed service, but they're taking expertise from the partner as part of their onboarding and operationalization program. And then we see it sort of in reverse with the large systems integrators. They will sell a complete project to deploy an application like Salesforce and customize it for that end user. And as part of that, they will wrap in security services and security products and tooling like App Omni. And so that particular channel tends to be more passive and pull where they identify an opportunity. It may be 100 times larger than the App Omni piece of the project, but it's a crucial piece of them delivering the application. Whereas, with a more traditional channel partner, evaluated reseller that focuses on security, we'll do what we've always done, which is go in with a partner, identify our ICP where there's overlap, and then jointly target that account, whether it's through events or making calls or introductions. Each of the channels works in a different way. And for us, global systems integrators, they don't really take their cues from us on where to find opportunity. They're identifying it for other services and products they sell, and they're pulling us in as a security component to that project.
So let's talk a little bit about App Omni. I mean, when you think about a solution, right? If I use kind of the burger analogy or a value meal analogy, are you the burger? Are you the fries? Are you the Coke? Or are you the patty? Like, where do you fit in the solution stack that an enterprise is buying?
It's a great question. I'd like to think that we're the burger, but in many situations, if we're being wrapped into a larger project that is centered on deploying a platform like Salesforce, which can be many tens of millions of dollars, very complicated deployment, multiple instances, then we're the fries, right? We're complementary to that larger project. That said, many SaaS security programs now originate with the CISO, with the security team. Their focus is covering as many of the SaaS applications in use in their enterprise that they possibly can. In that situation, we're very much the burger, right? We are the platform around which they build security monitoring for M365, for ServiceNow, for Workday, for Salesforce, for 50 other major SaaS applications. And so the real focus is our tooling as the center of that program, and then building all the connections into all their existing systems for ticket routing and remediation, for sending alerts to the SOC, and so forth and so on. Those become sort of the fries in your analogy. So it really depends on the specific use case of the customer and who's bringing us in and in what context.
That's great. So why don't we talk a little bit about the use case? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what App Omni does, exact pain points that you solve, and a little bit of the procurement process. How does a partner play through that process with your team?
So SSPM is a Gartner coined acronym, stands for SaaS Security Posture Management. It's somewhat unfortunate because the reality is that posture is only one part of SaaS security management, but that's the acronym that they chose. So that's the one everyone uses. There are multiple different use cases for this, but it starts with analyzing the global system settings that are relevant to security for each of the SaaS platforms. And just to give you a sense of how different each SaaS app can be, for Salesforce, there's only between 70 and 80 security relevant global system settings, right? They're either on or off. They're things like, is MFA required, password reset policies, those sorts of things. In M365, there's around 4,000 security relevant settings. And that's because M365 is really an umbrella for 28, 30 different products that have been pulled into that suite over the years. Right, so you start with analyzing how a customer has configured those security settings in their instance of a given SaaS platform, and then provide baselines, right? How do I compare to security best practices? But that's just the tip of the iceberg. After that, we do things like look at who has been entitled to what data within that application. And for each of these SaaS applications, the way that access to data is governed is completely different, right? So you have to understand how each application works. After that, you start looking at things like third-party connections into that SaaS platform. So I may have put Salesforce through a vendor security assessment, but my users and my admins are plugging in new third-party apps to my data every day, and they're not going through a security assessment. So how do I get a handle on the 100 or 200 third and fourth-party apps that have been plugged into my data? What are their scopes? Who installed it? Who's using it? Like what sort of activity is associated with that OAuth token granting that access to a third party? That's a whole world into itself. And then on the furthest right, away from posture, is threat detection. So these are generating audit events constantly, all day long as users are accessing the SaaS app. Who's looking at those events and looking for anomalous activity and behavior? The answer is, for most companies today, no one. Right? They're not ingesting the logs. And the reason they're not is sometimes they're not available. Sometimes if they are available, they don't have enough information to do meaningful threat detection. And then finally, they're all in different formats. So even within a same SaaS platform, you could have 10 different log formats for different parts of the product. And so somebody has to build parsers for all those different formats. They need to resequence the events because they come in out of order. There are usually little or no SLAs associated with when you get those events from the SaaS provider. So it makes threat detection really complicated. That is yet another aspect of SaaS security posture management. It goes way beyond posture, but that's the general concept: to amortize the work of understanding the security implications of settings, of RBAC, of third and fourth party apps plugged into a system, and then monitoring the activity of your users across one or many different SaaS apps in your environment. And that is what AppOmni hopes to.
Wow, so that's amazingly relevant in today's world. It's quite comprehensive, therefore possibly a little bit complex from a sales perspective. So can you talk about the sales motion? Like how does do you go through a POC? Do you just own one site? Do you demonstrate a few applications, then you expand across multiple countries? Like how does that work from a customer engagement wise? And then maybe we'll come back as a third part. How does a partner play?
Well, in a perfect scenario, a partner identifies a customer who's leveraging SaaS in a major way to run their business and is at least a little bit concerned about how those systems are configured. We meet with the customer or help them understand how the product works. It's API based, it's out of band, there's nothing to deploy, it lives in GCP, so forth and so on. Usually after that first discussion, a CISO will say, well, darn, now that I know about this problem, I have to do something about it, right? So the next step is one of two ways of demonstrating the capability and proving value. In some cases, it takes the form of a risk assessment. We'll connect to the customer's, let's say, Salesforce environment or ServiceNow or one of the other ones, ingest all of the metadata, run that through our product and our policy baselines, and come back to them with a point-in-time assessment. Here's how you scored against what we believe are the security best practices for this particular application. And here's who has access to what data, and so forth and so on. That's fundamentally point in time. And one thing that I think customers have a hard time understanding or they weren't aware of is that these systems are incredibly dynamic. There really is no change control process for managing SaaS. The SaaS apps are typically managed by line of business, right? The revenue team runs Salesforce. The HR team runs Workday. They're not centrally managed by IT and certainly not by security, right? So we do a point in time assessment and they'll say, okay, well, you identified 5 or 6 things. Why can't we just fix those? And say, well, because if we came back and did it again in a week, half of them would be broken again. And if we did it in 2 months, more things would be broken than before. So it begs for continuous monitoring. So that's one way that we do it. The second would be a full-blown POC. We provision a tenant for the customer. They connect 1, 2, 3, 5 applications to the platform. They may even go as far as integrating it with their SIM or like ServiceNow for ticketing to test the integrations. That can typically take a month, 2 months, sometimes longer with really large enterprises. But in one of those 2 ways, we can demonstrate the value, let them test it out, understand how it would work in their environment. And channel partners, in addition to just introducing us to the customer, can play a really critical role in helping them deploy the product and build a program around it. As we like to say that, SaaS security is not a product, it's a program. Just like everyone used to say about DLP, it's true here too. It's not simply, buy a product, turn it on, and you're good to go. There's a lot to work out in terms of who owns what tickets to route to whom, what the closed loop remediation process is for things that are discovered. And then, of course, the technical integration with many different systems in the customer's environment. That's
fantastic. So if we kind of step back a little bit into the customer journey, right? Jay McBain from Canalys, who is the chief analyst there from a channel perspective, he talks about these 28 moments from an end customer perspective that they go through these 3 broad steps. From a vendor perspective, it's, influence, land, and expand, right? So influence is predominantly maybe marketing, alliances, partners, trials, all of those things. And then land is when you engage, get a PO, and then you expand, through the life cycle of your product or other countries and etc. So if we step back a little bit in the influence part, how do you engage with partners to create the narrative? Because it's a relatively comprehensive purchase. So how does the influence part begin in a new account? Because you guys are growing a lot, so you must be breaking into green field or into a category that didn't exist before. So how does that play out?
That's really the hardest part for us, and I think for any startup that's in a net new category where there's no product to replace, there's no budget available to displace for something else and put your product in. I think it's very difficult for most channel partners, and it's totally understandable, to go out and evangelize a new segment in a new category. And I think it's unrealistic of companies to think that they're going to do that. Right? If you just look at the energy that it takes to close, let's say it's an upgrade cycle for, firewalls from Palo Alto or from SonicWall or anybody else, they understand that product inside out. So does the customer. This is more of a financial decision and a timing decision. If I'm a channel person, I'm going to spend my time on that, right? Because I have a much better chance of getting to my number, and those are generally going to be bigger deals with shorter sales cycles. So we don't go into it, and I never go into it at a startup thinking every security reseller out there should just immediately embrace my product and my problem and spend their time trying to convince CISOs and security leaders that they should be investing in this. I just don't think that's realistic. It doesn't happen. So, even though we aspire to be a completely channel-driven company, and that has been the goal from day one, we also recognize that it's going to take many years for the demand to be sufficient for the channel to respond to it in a meaningful way, right? So I think there's a few really key things about how we engage with the channel as an early stage startup in a new segment. First is put the program in place right away, have all the basics with deal reg and discounts and all of those things there, agree to co-invest with the partner in getting the message out, right? Air cover marketing, helping with messaging. Understand that it's going to take a long time before that channel partner is likely to be registering a lot of deals with you, right? But knowing in the long term that when the market does recognize this as a problem that has to be solved, right? Like everybody has to have endpoint security today. Everybody has to have firewalls, right? At some point, there's a decision in the market where, okay, enough of my peers have done this, right? And we've seen enough breaches, like the Snowflake breaches that happened a few months back, specific to this problem, that we have to invest in it. Once that happens, we'll have already built those channel relationships years in advance, and they will be there ready to respond to the demand. But early on, it's really hard because the channel partner, generally doesn't have the resources that are skilled in this area, right? They've not been selling a product to Secure, ServiceNow, or Salesforce, or Workday, so they don't know the application or where we do. Right? So building that skill set takes a very long time. Building, just repeatability of the story for channel partners to go out and understand it and the nuances of it takes a very long time.
So influence, you're saying, App Omni is at the lead. You're driving it. You're creating the awareness. You're getting the partner ready to have a transaction. So as the intrinsic recognition in the market grows, saying that I need a solution like that for a horizontal solution like firewall or internet security, then the demand starts coming to you versus you're creating it. In that case, partner can fulfill. So let's move to the second part of this Jay McBain's journey of influence, land, and expand. So let's recognize, or so that you have pulled the deal together, a partner is in the deal, you're going through some sort of an RFI, RFP, or POC motion. So how does the landing part work? Like, how do you work with the partner? How do you pull that transaction together? And I have one last part of that question. So let's say a lifetime value of a customer is $100,000. What percent of that do you expect in the land piece of it as a percent, not as an absolute dollar?
I think over the past couple of years, have seen a pretty significant shift in the behavior of enterprise buyers to smaller lands, right? Biting off what they can chew, and larger, more frequent, faster upgrades, right? So it was the case probably 2 years ago, even at the tail end of COVID, that customers would buy everything we have, right? An enterprise license agreement, every app module that we support, every feature set we support upfront, and in many cases for multiple years. We've done a lot of 3-year prepay SaaS agreements with the product. That is less and less common. We have a lot more companies of the same size and scale, same profile as ones that bought previously, that want to start at a third of that, let's say. Demonstrate success with 1 or 2 or 3 major platforms, learn how to operationalize it, and then repeat that pattern for apps number 4, 5, 6, 7, 40, 50. But that's not necessarily a bad thing that they grow into the platform. We'd rather see them start small, have success, really be pleased with the decision, build momentum within their own company to expand the product. And I mean, it really has shifted significantly.
So if you go back to, let's say, about $100K deal, right? Or lifetime value, not so much as a deal. what percent of that 100K, let's say a 3 year, $100,000, and I know it's low for your segment, but keep competitors out of your structure at a generic level. What percent of that would be in the land, and what percent would that be in expand phase?
Well, I think about a third.
About a third.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And in some cases, it's less than that. It's a quarter, it's 20%. It just really depends on how many applications the customer wants to start with, how ambitious they are about covering, their SaaS estate and how much they want to try to do right out of the gate. But since we sell to very large enterprise, their implementations of these products are very complex in and of themselves. Like we have one customer that has 200 separate production instances of Salesforce. For them, tackling that problem is a multi-year project in and of itself. Never mind then going after their Workday environment or ServiceNow. And the bigger that you get and the more complex these environments become, the more likely it is that they have a center of excellence, right? A team of people that's dedicated to running those platforms. And they may build custom apps on top of them. Right? That's the other thing about SaaS is it's not really just a web page with static, HTML and a backend database anymore. They're really PaaSes. They're platform as a service. You can build any conceivable business process or workflow on a platform like ServiceNow or Salesforce and now Workday as well. So they will start with that, and they may license everything that they need for that particular environment, but they're not going to license the same capability for a Workday and ServiceNow at the same time. They're going to do that over a period of multiple years. So in a situation like that, the land may be a quarter of what we'll eventually end up doing with that customer. And they'll typically come back within the same calendar year of the initial purchase. Right? Our goal is to get them deployed and operationalized as quickly as possible so that they can turn around and say, okay, now we want to extend this to other applications.
So from a lifecycle perspective, in the influence phase, you're leading. In the land phase, you're mostly leading and partner is participating. What happens in the expand phase? Does the partner lead or you're still leading?
That's also a mix. We do have customers where the partner has the primary relationship. They may have sold implementation services or consulting services in addition to the App Omni licenses. In those situations, they would lead. Right? They would identify the opportunity for upsell or cross sell. They would bring us in. We would quote together in effect and complete the upsell or cross sell with them. There are other situations where partners don't yet have the services capability to provide support post-sale. And in those situations, we would lead. But we still include the partner in the transaction.
Okay, so let's start double-clicking on the partner side now, right? So let's say you have three groups of partner who are able to influence, land, and expand, who is able to land and expand, and who is sort of, I'm assuming if they are able to expand in an account, they can also land an account, or you have partners only can do one in the later stage?
Well, I won't name them specifically, but think of the largest global systems integrator, headquartered here in the US. They can do it all. They became expert in our product very early. They built a sales motion around it with our help, but they built their own materials, their own pitch. We support them in doing risk assessments on their own, right? So we provision tenants for them, but they go out and do this on their own. So they can take it from, for lack of a better analogy, cradle to grave. Right? They can start the sales cycle, the conversation, the education. They can prove the value with their own risk assessments or POCs. They will resell the licenses. And then back to a question you asked earlier that I forgot to answer, they will actually deliver it as a managed service in certain environments. At the moment, I would say that App Omni is well suited for managed services where there's a dedicated tenant for that customer. So they are large enough of a customer that they would have a dedicated, App Omni environment. What we're working on now is things like a tenant of tenants so that smaller managed service providers who are going after the mid-market or SMB can offer that type of service to many customers from one instance. But partner like the one that I mentioned before literally can do everything. And there are situations where we just find out that an order has been submitted and a deal has been closed that we had nothing to do with.
Okay. So let's talk a little about building the partner ecosystem, right? So you have an amazing background and you have worked in these great companies. You also worked in smaller organizations where you had to build it. In App Omni, you also kind of came in at the early stages of growth. So talk to us a little bit about how did you start? How did you, at a C level, what was your first year look like? Thinking about, as you said, channel takes time. So I'm sure you possibly had a horizon in mind. What was the duration of the horizon? 18 months, 3 years that you gave yourself saying that, here are the things I'm going to lay out. I can recognize, or measure revenue in the early stage. As you said, it takes time. What were your metrics as you laid out the framework 1 year, 2 year, 3 year to grow and build this partner network? How did you measure the early stage, mid stage, and the late stage?
Yeah. So when I came into App Omni, like any other startup that I join, I don't want to prejudge what the right routes to market are going to be. And it turned out in this case to be very different than I would have assumed coming in. I mean, I think it all starts with choosing a problem that's big enough that people are going to care about it, right? It has a large enough TAM that other people haven't addressed yet, and that you've got a compelling, narrative about the company, the founders, why it was founded, the problem we're trying to solve, right? If you don't have any of those things, it's really hard to go to the channel and build anything. So, I'm not giving myself any credit here. It just, in choosing App Omni, I chose those things, right? So I think that the channel responded pretty well, but we didn't have a specific channel in mind. Like I knew that it was going to involve the security channel that sells to enterprise across the US. You could probably come up with the names of those companies. I'll leave them out. I reached out to all of them. I had worked with them many times in the past at Redlock, at Netscope, at other places. So, I had relationships there. That was kind of easy to have that conversation. Same thing with the GSIs, but I expected that would take the longest of any of our routes to market or any of our channels. It actually turned out to be the opposite. They were the fastest to revenue. And when I say fast to revenue, this sounds like an exaggeration. It was literally a matter of weeks between the first conversation with the largest GSI that we work with and a very significant deal, which was right in the middle or the beginning of COVID, where it was very hard to find anything. So going back to what I said about not kind of prejudging what the right routes to market are going to be, I assumed, like everybody else does, that building that channel with the GSIs was going to take many, many years. It actually ended up being our fastest channel to revenue, and it remains our largest source of revenue through the channel. I also did something which I consider a channel partner, but you may not, and your audience may not, and that is referral partners. They don't resell, right? So they don't put anything on their paper, they don't have credit, but they have relationships with 50, 60, 70 CISOs in a particular geography or in a particular vertical that can get us, myself, my CEO, access to a global 2000 Fortune 500 CISO very early in our journey to start that education process as quickly as possible at the top in the accounts that we believe to be our ICP. So we did all three of those things: the referral partners, GSIs, and then the security reseller channel. And as far as metrics, I didn't assign any at the very beginning because, again, I don't know upfront who's going to end up being the best route to market for this. The big difference between GSIs and a security reseller is that early in this market, what made us successful with GSIs is that we were dovetailing an existing business of theirs, which is selling consulting services to deploy and configure and customize major platforms, SaaS platforms like Salesforce. And so we very easily slotted into that. Whereas with the security channel, this was a brand new category that I think they knew and we knew was going to take a long time to educate the market and generate demand.
So now looking at the moment, if you look at your mix-up partner, I don't know how much you can share openly, but as much as you can, maybe in percent basis, what's the mix of your partner base like affiliate or referral partners, resellers, and service provider or MSP or large GSIs? And then maybe talk a little bit about how do you comp them, because they all do looks like different things. Like a GSI would do everything, and an affiliate or a referral partner will just give you a lead. Like, how do you structure a partner program from a compensation basis? Because in the end, it's all about money.
Right. So the resale program is pretty straightforward, right? There's a percentage for fulfilling a transaction. Let's just say that's 10%. There's a discount. And by the way, we do discount off of net, right? So this isn't MSRP minus X% for the different levels of contribution. It's off of net, right? So we share the pain equally if we have to discount significantly in a deal. But that always means the partner is getting the percent that they were promised as part of the program. At some point in the future, when we're so big that doesn't scale, we'll switch to the discount off of MSRP like most major large companies. So I would guess, and I don't have these in front of me, that about a third of our revenue is related to GSIs. In the case where they are actually delivering it as a managed service, we give them additional discount because that reduces the burden on our customer success team. But in every other case, it's the same across the board. Right, there's a set percentage discount on the service into perpetuity, right? Every year that they renew, because it's SaaS. For fulfilling a transaction, there is twice that roughly for also registering the opportunity, bringing it to App Omni. So, even when a GSI is reselling the product, they're getting the same discount structure, but by definition, since they're bringing us in and not the other way around, they're always registering it. So they're always getting the higher margin on the deal.
So going back to the first two types, if you look at a referral partner or a reseller, referral is more of a finder's, right? So do you pay them on a life cycle of the contract or just a one-time fee? How do you pay them?
That varies based on the referral partner. Each one of them has a different model, right? And depending on who the referral partner is, it could involve some component of equity in the company, a discount on first year in some cases. In some cases, it's the first 3 years. And that discount, or finder's fee rather, could be different from year one to year two and year three.
So let's come to your organization, right? So you had a vision, you kind of figured out your ideal partner profile. You have comm structure now figured out. Talk to us a little bit about the journey in building the team out, right? When you started, I'm assuming you had direct sales motion to validate and grow the market, right? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. We didn't really have any channel partners signed up when I joined the company. We had been shipping for 2 quarters. And let's just say that the ARR at that point was well under $500,000. Right. So it was the very beginning, small number of customers that our founders, had relationships with, friends and family, if you will. There are logos that people would probably recognize, but they were small Silicon Valley companies for the most part. I had one rep and I had one SE. Through a strange twist of fate, the rep that was there was somebody that had worked for me previously at another company that had not ended well, I think, in that person's perspective. And so very quickly I ended up with one SE, no sales rep. That was the beginning almost 5 years ago. And, fast forward to today, we have sort of methodically built up the team to cover more geographies. We have a team in Europe. We have a team in APJ out of Australia. In total, the team between reps, SEs, SDRs, and alliances, channel people, is around between 50 and 60 people. And the revenue has grown to, we're a private company, so I'll be vague. We'll just say the $50 million ARR area in that time. So yeah, it's grown significantly. And, with that, our channel and our channel relationships.
That's amazing. So Brendan, talk to a little bit about that journey, right? One rep or one SE to a team of 50, 60 people. As a CRO, how did you calibrate? Was the response from your side, from a resource allocation wise, monthly, quarterly, transaction driven? Suddenly you win a big deal, they pay up front, you're like, oh, let's go hire 3 sales rep because you had a plan, or it was opportunistic? Walk us through that journey, maybe, over the last 3 to 5 years. How did you build this team out?
Part of this is just having conviction that you're going to be able to hire the right people to get into the right accounts in order to justify the resource allocation and spend. I didn't wait for us to close big deals to decide that we needed to hire an enterprise sales team. I went to some of the best people that I've ever worked with in my career, which I'm fortunate to have a number of people from Palo and Redlock and Netscope and other places.
So Brandon, you have had an amazing journey. You've worked for these incredible companies. Talk to us a little bit about your leadership growth. When you joined as a young rep, in your first company, did you have I gotta be a CRO in mind? Or what was your playbook moving from one level to the next level to another level? I have seen you, work incredibly hard, so I take that for granted. But above and beyond that work ethic, what is that you think you were able to do, and what happened circumstances-wise that opened pathways for you to be where you are today?
I honestly believe that whatever success that I've had in this career comes back to one thing, and that is I'm a geek and I love tech. Always have, and I'm just fascinated by the technology. And so as a result, I'm willing to get into the products, play with them, configure them. I've always been able to install and configure every product that I've sold. I'm just really passionate about technology and solving security problems. It's kind of like the radar and radar detector dynamic, where it's a never-ending, constantly evolving space. So it keeps it fun and interesting. And I love to evangelize. And I love to bring the customer something that they don't know about yet and actually add value to them. And I think when you're selling at a startup in a new category, which has always been my preference, you have that opportunity even as a salesperson, right? You don't have to be an engineer to be able to go in and help educate a customer on a problem they maybe weren't aware of, or a solution to that problem that they weren't aware of. And I think everything flows from that, right? That allows you to attract other passionate people that love to go out and talk about technology and evangelize a new space. And I've been able to build a really great team of people across SEs, salespeople, alliances, and channel people that share that same passion and have the same background, and they just thrive on sort of the game aspect of this, right? Silicon Valley, going to a startup, building something from nothing, hopefully having a meaningful exit at the end of it. But it gets easier and easier every time that I do it, and I feel the same way for the people that have come with me and have worked together and have been a massive part of my success. So I think it all just comes back to really loving what you're doing, right? It's cliche, but if you didn't find it interesting and fun, you probably wouldn't be very good at it. I find this really interesting and really fun, and there's always more to learn. That was a roundabout way of answering your question. But
No, it completely comes across. I mean, as you're talking about it, I can see, your body language changes. You get fired up and talk about that. So it clearly comes across that you got to be passionate about what you're selling. Otherwise, it's hard to grow with that. So, Brandon, I know we're coming to an end. There's still much to talk about. I'd love to have you back, but thank you very much for your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.